Thank you for joining us. This is Paul Wilson.
And Chris Emke.
And you're listening to Diesel Performance Podcast. Chris, we got a full show today.
Yeah. There's a lot on the docket. We got some interviews. We got some DIYs. We got some support. We got it all.
Absolutely. Guys, we're going to be hearing from JW Montoya, who has a really awesome YouTube channel, currently mostly featured around his lifted L5P Duramax.
It's a good-looking truck. I'm not a lifted fan, but it's a good-looking truck.
Yeah, and you're going to hear us talk all about that, hear a little bit about his start in YouTube and kind of how it went and where it took him in life. And then, of course, we'll also be checking in with our Super Tech and our remote support expert.
Yeah.
So
I think the topic for the Super Tech segment is going to be interesting, to say the least. I think it's a topic that has a lot of popularity amongst some of the early 20-teen and current Duramax and Power Stroke platforms and some of the Cummins.
Yeah.
So I think it's a real eye-opener when you have a job like this firsthand and you get to see what that failure looks like. So I'm not going to say too much more.
I love it, guys. Well, it's going to be a fun one, so stick around. We're going to jump right into our conversation with JW Montoya.
Increase the durability, line pressure, and performance of the Allison transmission in your GM 6.6-liter Duramax LML and L5P with the XDP EPC solenoid Fooler plug. From the factory, the EPC solenoid increases line pressure up to 230 psi during shifting. Once the shift is complete, the pressure drops back down to 80 psi. At 80 psi of line pressure, your Allison cannot hold the added stress from aftermarket upgrades or heavy towing. The XDP EPC solenoid Fooler fixes this issue by installing onto the solenoid and back into the valve body. This lets your transmission effectively operate at 230 psi all the time. This eliminates clutch slipping, poor shifting, and extends transmission life. To find out more about the XDP EPC solenoid Fooler plug, check out xdp.com or find a local dealer near you.
Worley Custom Fab has been providing custom upgrades for the Duramax, Cummins, and Power Stroke community for over 15 years. Jason, Ryan, and the rest of the Worley crew are known for their excellence in not just fabrication, but also finish and fit and form. So we know that it's going to be a high-performing part. We know that it's going to look amazing. And because of Worley custom powder coating, we also know we can get it in absolutely any color we want. If you're thinking about upgrading the airflow, or you're thinking about traction bars, or you're thinking about upgrades that WC Fab can help you with, stop what you're doing right now and go to WCFab.com today. The Exergy Performance Fuel System Saver works. If you have a CP4 equipped fuel pump, which is commonly found on the 2011 to 2016 LML Duramax, and also the early 6.7 liter Ford Power Stroke engine, they're known for failure, period. Now, most of the time, if you put a lift pump on the truck, you'll prevent a lot of the potential failures. If you do regular maintenance, you can help prevent the potential failures. But at the end of the day, there's still a risk that no matter what you do, that CP4 could fail. And when they fail, they have a track record for sending all of the metal shavings downstream. So you end up needing a whole new fuel system, new lines, new injectors, new tubes, new everything. That could be very expensive. Even if you're under warranty or you find a bundle package for a great price, there's still a lot of labor that goes into that job. The Fuel System Saver increases the amount of protection post CP4. So it's not going to stop your CP4 from failing. What it's going to do is that, God forbid, the CP4 gives up and it starts to send metal debris through the truck, it's going to stop it before it hits the rest of your fuel system. And that's why they call it the Fuel System Saver. If you have a CP4 pump on your truck, you absolutely need to give DuramaxTuner.com a call today and get yourself a Fuel System Saver. JW, how the hell are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
We're doing all right. We're doing all right. We got you on, so we're doing better.
Absolutely, man. Excited to talk to JW Montoya here. Obviously, if you guys have been on YouTube and following L5P content, you've most likely come across his channel. But JW, why don't you start where everybody does? Tell us how you got your start in diesel performance.
Sure. So My first truck was actually an '05 Sierra 1500, and I used to tow with that truck, and I just noticed it didn't have enough power, and I just heard people talking about how diesels had more power, and I've always liked my trucks lifted with bigger wheels and tires, so I started looking at diesels, obviously, and I naturally started looking at Duramax trucks because I'm just a GM guy. So my first diesel truck was a 2004 and a half LLY Duramax, and that's what pretty much started my YouTube channel.
Okay, so how many years have you been doing YouTube now?
So YouTube in general, I've been doing it, I think, since probably like about 10 years ago. I started out doing soccer and other videos, and when I got my first truck, I started kind of documenting it, and I started seeing a couple of people do truck stuff on YouTube. And I just told myself, let me just document everything I do. And I just kind of took a chance and sold the 1500 and bought a Duramax, and I just started modifying it. And then people started I started gaining interest from that, and that's how it pretty much started.
So what year did you get that 04 and a half truck?
That was roughly like 2017, I think.
Okay.
I love real quick, Chris. I love diving into the Duramax world straight with an LLY.
Right.
Was it modified? Was it high mileage? Can you tell us a little bit about the truck when you first got it?
Sure. So it was a 2004 and a half, like I said, and it only had 139,000 miles. And to me, like coming from a gas truck, I was like, wow, that's a lot of miles. But a lot of people told me, like, for a diesel, that's not a lot at all. And it was bone stock. I don't even think it had a leveling kit on it. Only thing it had was an aftermarket head unit and like a gooseneck setup, I think. And otherwise, it was bone stock. He just used it as a tow pig.
I love that. I love jumping in with a truck that I specifically have talked a lot of shit about throughout the years of the podcast.
I love it. I love LLYs.
Oh, man. It's not that an LLY can't have all the problems fixed. It's that usually, like that introduction to diesel, what scares a lot of guys off is a bunch of repair bills right away.
That's true.
139,000 miles in 2017. That's like a 12. You know what I mean? That's 12-year-old truck roughly.
Yeah.
What kind of problems did you run into when you got it, man? What broke and what did you upgrade for fun?
So believe it or not, I didn't have any issues with it because I owned it for about 2 years, and I really didn't run into any issues. And I love that truck. The only thing I did was, obviously with the LLYs, I replaced the turbo mouthpiece. That was one of the first things I did. And then I did SMB cold air intake.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then did you tow with that truck, or did you just kind of just do some basic mods to it and then roll it on to the next one?
Yeah, I really didn't tow much with it. The reason why I bought that truck was to tow with it, but and then I just started. I was still in college, and I was working a lot more than I was before, and I just wasn't able to go on all these trips that required me to tow, so I kind of stopped towing with it.
Okay, and then what happened next?
Well, I started learning more about Duramaxes. So the way I am, once I kind of fall in love with something, I like to do a lot of research. So I just spent hours and hours on forums, watching videos on YouTube on what I can really do, like what's all involved in making my truck better, more reliable, faster, louder, and all that stuff. But for my first LOI, I really didn't do too much. It was lift, wheels, tires, tune, exhaust. That was really about it. I never even really got to doing like a lift pump or anything like that. It was just basic tune and exhaust.
So just enough to gain some more interest. And you said you had that truck a couple of years. So following up that, what was the next, just going to assume that it was a Duramax, what was the next truck in the lineup?
Sure. So I sold that Duramax, and I bought a 2011 LML Duramax. It was a Denali.
Okay. Now that truck I've seen on the channel and stuff like that. That was the black truck, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so walk us through. It's very common for Duramax crowd, any of the enthusiasts. You start with one of the older trucks, something that's a little bit less expensive. You do some small, simple mods. The more time you invest into learning how to make that truck more powerful, it's like, well, there's a lot of money. I could probably get a decent buck for this truck. I'm just going to upgrade and trade up, which probably something along those lines with the LML. So, what was the state of the LML, your Denali, when you got it, and what did that truck end up turning into?
Sure. So that truck was just tuned when I bought it. Like I said, still no lift pump on that truck, just tuned. It had basic, like a 4.5-inch PDS lift, 22x12s, 35s. It was a very simple truck. And obviously I started doing a lot of research on the LMLs and found out about the CP4 pump, which I told myself, with my luck, I'll probably end up with a failed CP4. So I saved up, and one of the first things I did on that truck was a lift pump and a CP3 conversion.
Nice. Okay. Going straight for the reliability factor then, kind of looking at it of like, I've heard a lot about this failure, and I feel like every LML owner we talk to, Chris, says the same thing. Everyone is like, I'm going to be the guy who has it fail. We all feel that way, right? Because we all feel like it's going to be the one.
So one of the things that I find really unique with what you do with YouTube vlogging, stuff like that I wanted to kind of back into that, Paul asked the question earlier. When you first got your LLY, I know you said you did some vlogging with, soccer and stuff like that you were into. How many subscribers and what was the metrics around, followers, whatnot on YouTube when you bought your LLY when you started?
Interestingly enough, my channel that I have now, it actually wasn't a truck channel at all. It actually started with the girl that I was dating at the time, and it was just us doing like a bucket list.
Okay.
And then obviously it didn't work out, and I just started, just putting my truck content on there, and just went from there.
Okay.
So metrics, once I got the LOI, that's when it really started growing, because I was doing some really basic stuff, but I was documenting everything.
Okay.
Like removing the running boards, debadging the truck, just starting from scratch.
Okay.
I love that. So the relationship vlog didn't do so well, but you put a truck on there.
And he married him.
Like, all right, I'm in.
He married himself to the game. Now he's part of the truck world, right? So
I'm kind of glad it didn't work out.
So then you had the LOI. You went through the 2 years on that. You got into this LML. And, what's that like? I guess is one thing that's for me is me working here at Calibrated Power, working with, our producer Justin and Paul. I am very close with these guys because they're usually the ones behind the camera filming me, or it's me and Paul getting filmed. I'm not having to walk around with a selfie stick, as I'll call it, filming everything that I'm doing. Was that hard to get used to? Like, what's that dynamic in, I'm going to take running boards off of my LLY, which is an hour process. Now I'm going to film it. Now that's a 2.5 hour process. Like, what's the thought process around that?
Then you got to edit it.
What did that... Is that normal to you now? Is it not normal to not film yourself? Like, how do you condition yourself for that?
Man, I still struggle because I'm an introverted guy, so I still don't like talking in front of my camera sometimes. But I mean, it was really weird at first just because I didn't want to talk in front of a camera. So if you go back and watch my videos, a lot of it is just kind of, it's not even really me talking, it's just clips and with music on top.
Okay.
A lot of time lapses and like a little bit of talking there. And as I, got a little bit more confident with vlogging, I started talking in front of my camera. But I'm just really blessed to have friends and family who are also involved in like modifying vehicles. So it really helps that I get to kind of document their builds and make them talk in front of a camera, or they talk with me in front of a camera.
Cuts the edge off, right?
Mm-hmm.
I love that too, because I've noticed on your channel there are a lot of other characters that tend to be on the channel on a regular basis.
Other trucks and stuff like that, which is really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I feel like, as a truck enthusiast, we want to look at like everyone else's builds. So it gets kind of boring if it's just my build strictly. And I just love being able to share all my friends and everyone else's builds on my channel. I think it's really unique.
Well, one of the things I find really unique about vlogging with YouTube is I remember, starting to, have that interest in this industry, and I would read a magazine, right? And you could see all the pictures of the engine bay and the trucks all cleaned up, but you can never hear the sound. You never got that in-cab feel. You never saw the truck do a launch on the road or anything like that. And now there's this opportunity in a vlog where, you watch someone like JW walk through this build, right? Oh, I bought this truck. It's on a lift. I'm doing wheels and tires. Hey, I'm going to trade out and sell these wheels and tires. I'm going to buy a new set of wheels and tires. But then you have that feeling that goes along with that of this is what the truck sounds like. This is the in-cab of the truck, where I see where, that vlogging aspect becoming more and more popular.
Yeah.
In JW, I mean, you had the LLY. You now have a newer, not a newer LLY, but you just bought another LLY for the channel as well.
Sure did.
We'll dive into that. So it's cool to have that first-hand, this is the experience, right? Like maybe you guys can't, swing or afford that, or maybe you're looking at buying a truck, but here's the ins and outs, and this is the process of a build. It's not like you just buy the truck and the next day it's modified.
I can't. You're like breaking my heart right now. Like that is how I want. That's what I want.
That's what everyone wants. But I think this YouTube thing really gives guys an opportunity of like, hey, it's not an overnight, thing. There's a lot that goes into that. So
sure, Well, let's talk about that timeline. So JW, so you had the LML, and listeners, please jump over the channel, watch some of the LML videos. I wanted to make sure we set aside some time to talk about the current L5P because it's a very nasty setup.
It's a badass truck.
There's a handful of guys out there who have gone with big lifts and tires.
Yeah.
And I've always joked that this is something that I love the way it looks, and I would never, ever, ever own in my life.
Right. It's a taste.
One, I'm way
right?
too cheap to do it, and two, I'm just
are.
too practical. I just couldn't do it for
Gas
myself.
is expensive.
But I love to see these trucks. So walk us through that L5P build that you have now.
Sure. So I bought the L5P December of 2020. Sold the LML for it. It's a 2020 AT4. It's got a 9-inch McGoy's lift, 24x14s, 38 Furies. Everything's color matched black. It's tuned with exhaust. That's about it.
I think his tires are up to your shoulders, Chris.
100%.
It's not that big. It's only 38.
Well, Chris is pretty small.
Yeah, we're about there.
Now tell us about why did you pick the lift? Why did you decide to go with this big? And then what is it like to drive?
Sure. So I've always liked lifted trucks. And actually, when I bought my second LOI, because I love my LOIs, I wanted to do something more practical. I didn't want to do another 9-inch lift because that's what I did with my first LOI. So I wanted to do something different. I wanted to do something lower, stanced, and be more practical. Easier for me to take it to, let's say, if I'm going to, go get groceries or something, I wanted to take the LOI. So since I had that, with the 2020, I wanted to do something bigger, I would say less practical, but cooler to take to shows. So that's why I went with the big lift on the 2020.
I like that. I like that a lot. Just know the purpose, right? We talk about that a lot with trucks, Chris, and a lot with customers where we're like, hey, listen, man, if you want the show truck, let's talk about the parts you need to build a show truck. If you're going to tow with this, let's not make it a balls out race truck, right? Let's maybe not run just a single race tune, and things like that. Thinking about why do I want this? What do I want to get out of it? How does it drive, man? How does it feel to drive an L5P that's lifted? Because I know most of the giant lifts and 9-inch lifts and big 40s and shit like that I've driven have all been older trucks. I don't know about you, Chris. Have you driven anything that's 2015 and newer with a 9-inch lift on it?
We just had a customer in here with a 6-inch lift on 24s and 37s.
There you go.
And a 2021 AT4. So
how was it?
Drove surprisingly well. I was really surprised. I liked how the 10 speeds shift around the bigger tire, believe it or not. The truck was the truck actually performed nicely.
I'm blown away.
I know, I was too.
JW, what do you think? How does it drive compared to when you had just normal tires and stance on it?
When I bought that truck, it actually had a 5-inch lift and 37s. And
of course it did.
But I mean, my dad has a 2021, and he bought it brand new after seeing my truck. And And honestly, compared to his truck when it was stock, and we actually put a leveling kit on it with Kryptonite Stage 2 kit with the Fox 2.0 shocks. And honestly, I'm not gonna lie, my 9-inch lift rides just as good in my opinion. And I've gotten to the point where if I modify my vehicle, I'm gonna use that opportunity to upgrade everything I can, reinforce some of the weak points. So what I did was I upgraded the tie rods to Kryptonite tie rods. I swapped out the factory idler and pitman arm with Kryptonite's Death Grip or Kryptonite's heavy duty parts. And it rides better than stock in my opinion because I just upgraded all those components that were weak points on these trucks.
I like that. I like that approach to it, right? I know a lot of guys, especially when they build a show truck, and I don't know how many times you've seen this, Chris, they get it as tall as they can. They spend all their money on wheels and tires, and then they literally can't tune it because they're like, everything's going to break, right?
So let me ask you this, JW. So you've definitely angled yourself on your YouTube channel, with the angle of like a lifted big tire, big wheel truck. I know you said the LLY is going to be slightly different, lowered, stanced out, which, that's more my speed. Have you done any, like I know you had a buddy that had a twin turbo L5P that just recently sold when I was watching one of your episodes. But what are you going to get into a performance build? Is that maybe where that LLY is going to go and, do some, 800,000 wheel horsepower nasty street truck? Or is that not really your avenue that you're looking at going down?
Luckily, I got my buddy Holden that spends all his money on performance parts. So that's who I document in terms of all the performance stuff. He did get another truck that's really, it's something special that I'm going to reveal pretty soon. And, for me, with the LOI, with all my trucks, maybe one day I want to do like a straight up performance truck, but I like kind of like a normal daily driver that has the potential to have more power. So I like building my stuff for reliability.
Okay. I respect that.
I like that. A little bit of show, a little bit of reliability goes a long way. I dig
that's
it, man.
why on the LML I just did a CP3 swap and the lift pump and just some of the piping, just to make sure it's reliable. But I wasn't going for 800 horsepower, just something that was more practical, I should say.
Yeah, I like that. Awesome, man. Well, I know we're all really excited to see more videos come out in the future. I think this is something that we're definitely going to be following along with and really making sure that we keep an eye on your channel. Listeners, I think we'll probably see some Duramax tuner parts maybe float their way onto the channel here in the future.
Right.
And is there any piece of advice you would like to give to somebody who maybe is thinking about going out there and starting their own YouTube channel around diesel performance or around being a diesel truck enthusiast?
Sure. So, I do get that question a lot, and I do tell people, you just got to do it. I feel like most of the times we all think a little bit too much and we judge ourselves too harshly. So even if you think your video is not good, just post it, because you got to start somewhere. And your first video is not going to be good. And you just got to learn. You just got to learn to get better from it. Like my first video was terrible. First couple of videos, my whole first year, I think it was terrible. And I'm still trying to get better every day. And that's what I want to tell people is that you just got to do it.
I think that's a really good piece of advice. I know for us, the first 10 episodes are terrible. No matter what project we're on, if it's a new video line or a new the
even
podcast.
videos that you guys do to this day. With you guys, with Nick, they have to get retaken.
Yeah. It's you're always working on it. I think that's a really good point to make, guys. Listeners, make sure you stick around to the show. We're gonna have our Super Tech and a brand new segment from our remote support specialist as well. This has been Diesel Performance Podcast. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Guys, I'm always excited to jump into our Super Tech segment, and I know everybody loves hearing from Jeremy Garnett. Go follow him on Instagram. But today we have a special guest, Super Tech, Jaden. Jaden, how the hell are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Paul?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for asking. You shop guys are always so polite. Jaden, you've been with the shop for a little while now. You've been around diesel for a long time. being a mechanic here, you get to see some of the fun projects like the Hummer build going on.
Oh, yeah.
You get to see transmissions getting built right next to you. And then also you get to go and wrench on pretty much everything else that's broken. I know is like your specialty, right?
Oh, yeah.
So you're here for a lot of the repairs and things like that. I understand we had a fun one in the shop here that kind of highlighted some of the stuff we've been talking about with CP4s lately. What was the truck?
So it was a 2012 F350. Big dually, long bed. It's over-the-road guy. Does a lot of transport jobs. So, yeah, he had actually towed the truck in with a crank no start.
Oof.
So, and I guess from what I've heard, he towed it in pretty far. Like, he towed it in from, I think, North Carolina.
Oh, my God.
So, yeah, he towed the truck in, crank no start. He'd complained about maybe hearing some buzzing in his lift pump. So he thought maybe he was getting some air up to the CP4. So, pulled it in, crank with the scan tool, not getting any rail pressure. All right. He complained about a lift pump issue. Unplugged the supply thing, put it under a pan, turned the key on. I'm getting plenty of fuel. So it's not a lift pump problem. Lift pump sounds great, everything else. So go from there. On these Fords, you got to take the whole intake manifold off to get to the actual CP4. So took the intake manifold out, pull the pressure sensor out of the top of it, and it's just covered in metal.
Oh.
I mean,
that just makes you cringe, doesn't it? The pictures are up over on the Duramax Tuner Instagram feed. So if you guys want to see like how bad it was, it is sparkly.
Oh, yeah.
It looks like somebody bedazzled this thing. Like, it is brutal.
Yeah, it's definitely probably one of the worst ones I've seen.
So you had mentioned this guy's a previous customer at Duramax Tuner. He was here about a year ago, right?
Yeah.
What was he here for a year ago?
It was actually, I think, the similar thing. Jeremy had put a whole fuel system in the truck because the same thing, the CP4 had failed, but he didn't have the fuel system saver at the time. So when it failed, it just shot all the debris right downstream. I mean, it took out the rails, the lines, the injectors, even the return circuit. I think they even dropped the fuel tank and had to flush all that out with it.
I remember seeing this truck in the shop. I recognized this truck. So I walked through the shop, and I recognized this truck when it was here. And I had heard that there was a CP4 job going on in my head. I honestly was like, well, it's no way it's that Ford. We did that job last year.
Yeah.
But sometimes this happens, right? Like CP4s, like even when we do everything we can to prevent them from failing, sometimes you just run into this. Like he put the lift pump on it. Were the filters clean on the lift pump? Like it wasn't like he had just been neglecting maintenance.
No, it was clean. I mean, the only thing that was different about this truck than most is the guy puts a lot of miles on. He'd put 70,000 miles on in 6 months.
Ooh. That's just rough, man.
Yeah,
that's just it's rough on a truck. It's just operating for that many hours. Just think about how many hours a day you have to drive to keep up to do 70,000 in 6 months.
A lot.
So that's just rough. You're advancing some of the wear and tear, but the Exergy fuel system saver worked. I mean, that's the highlight of the story is like because the pump itself, it was a new pump, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, like I said, everything was replaced. I mean, the pump, lines, injectors. I mean, return lines, everything got
Did he have
replaced.
warranty on the pump then?
Yes. I don't know on the original one because I wasn't here for that one, but on this one, he does get a warranty on the pump. And the fuel system saver saved everything downstream, so compared to the first job, he's definitely getting off a lot easier.
Oh, my God. A couple $100 for the fuel system saver compared to, like, it's like a $10,000 or $12,000 job to do the whole fuel system. Like, it's not cheap. It's a lot. Even if you had somebody pay for the parts, it's a lot of hours.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you're going to be out of pocket. It's just murdersome on those.
I mean, the parts aren't cheap, but the labor is the big killer. I mean, you're talking probably 30 hours of labor to do a whole fuel system.
Ouch. And then, so if you have ever been thinking, should I get a fuel system saver? Do I really need it if I have a lift pump? The answer is yes, unequivocally.
100%.
This is the one that, like, I think anybody who thought about it and was like, well, should I or shouldn't I? It's a clear yes. Now, what I always bring this up with, like, the guys who immediately when they buy, like, an LML or a Ford in this range, or they're like, I'm going to delete it and put a CP3 on it. I'm like, well, you don't necessarily have to. Like this job sucks, right? Like, you don't want to run into this. But most guys aren't going to go through 2 CP4s in a year.
No. That's probably one of the rarest cases you're going to see.
Out of all the ones we've ever had to repair and replace and diagnose and dick with here at the shop, this is the first guy I've seen come back this soon, especially after doing everything he could. But like we said, he's using his truck in a very abnormal way. He's using his truck more than the rest of us combined, right?
Tons of mileage, and he's probably got plenty of weight behind him, too, when he's doing it. So.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's awesome, man. I appreciate it. How about doing a CP4 replacement? Are there any pro tips you could share with our listeners? Is there, like, that thing that you're like, man, I wish I would have known this the first time I had to do this job?
Well, on this Ford specifically, like if you're used to doing a lot of Duramax stuff on the LMLs, you can just pull the gear and whole pump right out of the housing there. On the Fords, the gear actually has to come off. So if you're not used to that, and you're like, why? How can I not get the CP4 out? Well, you got to take the bolt off and actually punch the gear off because it does not fit.
Oh, that's right. Because this CP4, I remember talking to Randy at Exergy about this. They don't necessarily always run a lift pump on these Fords because they have that special gear drive on the back of the pump that gives it a higher feed PSI into the CP4 itself.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha. Okay, that's right. That's a good heads up, man, because that'd be one that, like, I know me as like a Duramax guy, I'd get out there and be like, it's a CP4. I know Duramax.
And they look identical, so you'd be like, oh yeah, I've done this before on LMLs. And you go to wiggle the thing out, and you're like, why won't it come out? Well, you got to pull that vacuum pump out and then pull the gear out, and then it'll pop right out like butter.
Nice. That's a good pro tip, man. Well, Jaden, for your first time on Diesel Performance Podcast, I want to say you killed it. This is a great one.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Guys, stick around. Coming up next, we're going to be talking to our remote support expert, Sean Lynn. He's got some really cool information about doing a 2020 Power Stroke tuning install. I think you guys are going to really love it. Sean Lynn, how the hell are you?
Great. How are you, Paul?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for coming down and joining us for the remote support expert segment of our show. Sean, we've had you on to do troubleshooting. We've had you on with our super tech, Jeremy Garnett, to work together on some troubleshooting, which I always think is fun. But today, I wanted to get a little bit back to the roots to when we first brought you onto the show. We had you painstakingly read some instructions. We're not going to do that. Don't worry. But the 2020 Power Stroke tuning that's out there right now for those 6.7 liters is starting to get really, really popular. There's a lot of guys calling into Duramax Tuner, and I know on the social media side, I'm getting a lot of stuff on Facebook with like, how does the process work? What do I do? What all does it entail? Can you walk our listeners through what does it look like tuning a new 2020 Power Stroke?
Yeah, me and Tim have gone through a number of these locally here, so it's nothing new for us at this point. Basically, the ECM process is either the truck needs to be here for us to flash it while it's in the truck, or if you're further away, we basically need the ECM in here to flash and then send it back to you.
Where's the ECM located on these trucks?
It is on the passenger side above the battery.
Nice.
On the firewall.
So not too bad to get to then?
It's like 2 bolts and 3 connectors, I believe, to pull it out.
Okay. It's not an LB7, right? You remember pulling ECMs and LB7s all the time? I do not miss that.
Those are fun.
Okay. Good. Okay, so it's pretty basic to get to. You got to pop the ECM out. For a lot of our listeners, you guys would be looking at the mail-in option, right? The unfortunate side of this is your truck is down while this process is happening. There are no core ECMs to be able to get a hold of. It's not like an L5P HP tuner situation where we could just buy unlocked ones. We actually have to work with your ECM out of the truck to make this all work. But the result is well worth it. And I think some of our previous episodes we've talked about that. So, okay, let's say they're shipping it into us, Sean. They ship us in the ECM. What is our process here? How do we then get it turned around and get it back to the customer?
Yeah, so basically I'm usually the one that does it. We plug it into our harness on the computer. We read the information off of it so that we have a good basis if we ever have to go back to stock.
Right.
We flash the new tune on there, make sure everything's good, and then we send it back to you.
That's it, yeah. So the process on our side, as far as internally at like Duramax Tuners, not going to take a ton of time. It is a little bit labor intensive because we do have to like manually bench flash an ECM, but it's not like it's a 3-day process. If we get it in on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the morning, we're hoping to get them back out that same day. Now, it might take us a day, and God forbid we were really slammed or something crazy was going on or there's a holiday. You might find another day of lead time in there. But generally speaking, we're trying to turn these around just as quickly as we physically can, right?
Yeah, the last one that we got, the guy overnighted it to us because obviously he wants to drive his truck.
Sure.
We got it at like 9 o'clock in the morning, and I read it off and took it down to shipping before it was even noon. So
yeah,
he got it back really fast because he paid for return shipping back, and all went well.
And that's how to do it, right? Bing, bang, boom. So, okay, so that's the ECM, right? So now you get the ECM back. You've taken it out. You should know how to put it back in. They put the ECM back in their truck. What else is it involved here?
Yeah, so that's just for the engine part right there. Pretty straightforward for you. You install it, as you said.
Yep.
The transmission tuning then would be up to you. We usually do EasyLink for that. So just like if you've ever dealt with it before, you plug a module into your truck and you go on there, link your vehicle, choose the transmission tune, install it. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, it's a little squarish looking box, or rectangular looking box. You plug it into the OBD2 port. That's like underneath the dash on the driver's side, usually close to the door. You'll see a little trapezoid looking plug. So when the EasyLink shows up, you'll just plug that in. Now, you're not tuning the engine with EasyLink. You're only tuning the transmission with EasyLink. Sean, you had mentioned it's optional. It technically is optional. It's a really stupid option not to tune your transmission, especially with these 10 speeds. It may be the transmission right up there with the 68 RFE that needs it the absolute most. Like, it's okay stock, it'll work stock, but like once you start adding power to it, you absolutely need that transmission dialed in.
Yeah, it just complements the tuning, makes the truck run and drive better, feel smoother, shifting and stuff,
Yeah.
And they have an option between EasyLink, or if they want to use HP tuners, we can do that as well.
It is possible, yeah. Okay, so it's not too bad of a process because you're going to use your smartphone, so you're going to plug in your EasyLink. You're going to use your smartphone to access everything else. You install the TCM tuning. You can then unplug the EasyLink if you want. I always get that question on Facebook. You don't have to leave the EasyLink in the truck unless you're going to run the gauges, right? So if you want to use your phone for gauges and things like that, a little bit different story. On these 2020s, you're picking up a lot of horsepower. You're still running all of your factory emissions equipment. You're not giving up any reliability. It's a little bit heavier of a price tag than, say, like a box programmer or a pedal fooler. But the end result of what you're getting is just so much more. It's the reason that you bought a new diesel compared to going buying an old used piece of crap was because you wanted the best. You wanted the best you could possibly get. And this tuning is going to complement that kind of buying decision. So I think it's a really helpful, Sean, that you were able to come in. Are there any problems that guys commonly run into during the installation process? Anything you could give them like a pro tip or a heads up on?
The only thing I would say is if you're installing the transmission tune and for some reason happens from time to time with EasyLink, if your phone disconnects or something, you might not complete the flash. And if that ever happens, you just pretty much go and run the flash again, and it usually goes through no problem.
God, EasyLink, so it's my preferred tuning platform personally, but I know professionally as well, Duramax Tuner is kind of on that side of like, man, there are programmers in the past that if anything interrupted a flash, you were bricked it, done, the ECM's junk, you need a new one. Now with EasyLink, with TCM tuning, you're flashing it, and like you said, like, hey, if there's a hiccup, don't panic, flash it again. If you have the problem 2-3 times in a row, okay, give us a call, we'll talk to you about it. They're most likely we're going to tell you, keep flashing it till it goes through. It's probably a phone connection issue.
Yeah, just some of the phones will disconnect from it because it doesn't detect an internet connection because it's just, communicating.
Yeah.
And it'll sometimes happen.
Gotcha. Good heads up, man. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Listeners, stick around. Chris is going to be back on in just a moment, and we'll be wrapping this show up for you. Listeners, thank you so much for joining us today. I know this has been a lot of fun. We're going to have a lot more exciting shows coming at you. Make sure to subscribe and tell a friend about Diesel Performance Podcast. We'd really appreciate that.
Or invite friends over into our podcast on Facebook.
Absolutely.
Page,
Fans of Diesel Performance Podcast Facebook group, always welcoming to invite new members. We got a lot of cool discussions going on over there, so come on over, join the thread, and talk to us a little bit more. For today, this has been Paul Wilson.
And Chris Emke.
Thanks for listening. Thank you for joining us. This is